Hello, this is Taha.
This is Anayana,
This is Movie Masala.
and we're here to yap at you about films we've watched recently.
And today we're doing Gladiator II.
Ooh.
It is an art, choosing gladiators. They're usually prisoners of war.
I claim this city for the glory of Rome.
You have something in you. Rage. Never let it go. It will carry you to greatness. I own you now. But whose head could I give you to satisfy?
Okay, this film comes after 23 years, nearly quarter of a century later, after the original award-winning, Best Picture Oscar-winning Gladiator starring Russell Crowe. And honestly, its plot is very much the same as Gladiator 1. It follows Paul Mescal's character as he is captured by the Romans. He becomes a gladiator, and his goal through becoming a gladiator is to basically take revenge on the people that caused his plight, right? His wife is also killed pretty early on. He doesn't have a kid, so that's the only real difference between him and Russell Crowe's character from the first film. However, while watching this film, I was like, this is basically, as we now call it, a requel, which is when you do a sequel but reboot the franchise.
In nicer words, a remake.
A remake. Yeah, it's like a remake sequel, a requel. But as the film went on, I did feel like it was adding more to the previous installment. And while, yes, its plot is very much similar to the original, I think where this film distinguishes itself is through what it adds to them. So before I get on to explain more of the plot, I'm going to quickly get off the criticisms I have. Firstly, I think there's a pacing issue. I think the film is paced very unevenly at parts. You like your movie specifically with grander epics like Gladiator to steadily build up to a climax where it all explodes. And I think it just slows down and picks up too much that at the end, you're still captivated, but it doesn't feel as grand as it should once it all culminates. And secondly, again, the issue is it doesn't feel as grand as it should in general. I feel it lacks the scale necessary to do that effectively. So when you're doing a story like this, then you can either focus on the characters much more and show their struggles because you bleed that into what the film needs. But to do that, you need to pick characters across a diverse area, not specifically centered around one part. Good example is in Game of Thrones, there are stakes very much, but those stakes are for the characters. You're never really afraid for Westeros as a whole, very much. In the same way, you are invested in the characters, but the grander idea that it's telling you about the fall of Rome, that never really sinks in because it just doesn't feel like it's showing you the scale that necessary to do that. Yeah, so I feel that is something that is missing within this film. So this film's primary story is kind of an ensemble which more focuses on the rebirth of Rome in a sense.
Right. Okay.
Basically trying to fully realize the dream Russell Crowe's character had. That is also the dream of Marcus Aurelius from the first film.
All right. That's interesting.
I do not remember most of these names. They're going to be hard.
That's okay.
So it tries to see the gaps in that dream as well. And it does through multiple means. So firstly is Paul Mescal's character is not exactly Russell Crowe's character. What I mean by that is where Pedro Pascal comes in. So Pedro Pascal in this film is the general who is fighting with the Romans and then later gets betrayed by the rulers of Rome. Right? That's Pedro Pascal's character. Paul Mescal is never really trying to take the throne of Rome. That happens much later at the end after spoilers, other plot things happen. Right? Where you learn about Hanu is his name in the film for a majority and before you learn his real name and who he really is.
Oh, okay.
I've said so much. But yeah, it has this duality of characters and through that it explores, for example, with Pedro Pascal, that he is a general who's led Rome through victory and he does care for Rome. But also because it separates these characters with Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal, it also lets you to examine the havoc Pedro Pascal has caused, the death he has caused himself and how that has lingers effect. So in the end of the film, spoilers again, when he dies, while it does feel sad because you're still rooting for him because he's still framed on our protagonist's side, it also feels like a comeuppance. It also feels like the consequences of his own actions. And that's why I feel it interrogates the original a bit more. It tries to examine the original's understanding. It tries to examine the Rome essentially itself. Is that an idea? Is that worthy enough to uphold the flaws in the system of Rome itself?
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yep. So I mentioned a duality. This duality is also present in the film's primary antagonist, played by Joseph Quinn and Fred Eckinger, who are these brothers, Emperor Geta and Corsola. And they again also represent this duality between Joaquin Phoenix's role from the version, where Quinn's character is much more calculating, much more methodical in their approaches towards power, while Fred Heckinger's character is much more bloodthirsty, just likes the access of power. And through, again, both of these things, it shows you more vividly how both of these things are flawed in their own senses and how these characters have their downfalls as well.
Yeah.
I think, although my favorite role in this film is Denzel Washington's character,
Yeah.
not only is Denzel a great part in this film, he chews up the scenery so wonderfully when he needs to, but also I think his character also really shows you, again, this flaw in Rome that I keep talking about, that I keep coming back to. So Denzel Washington's character is basically the gladiator master, Marcinus. I probably am remembering that wrong. Does not matter. And he tells Paul Mescal that if you keep fighting for me, I will give you the head of the person that you want to take revenge on. But coming back to Denzel Washington, he has this really good line in the film, and I'm paraphrasing here. What a slave wants most is not freedom, but to own another slave. And while that might not be a true statement in general, it's a great line to show his worldview to you specifically. Because throughout the film, you learn that he himself was a gladiator. He himself was a captor. You see this mark that is branded on him to show that he was also a slave of Rome, and how he came through the ranks, right? And now he keeps climbing on this ladder of power. He's very much Varys from Game of Thrones, again coming back to Game of Thrones, because a lot of this film is a political fantasy thriller type thing,
Okay. Yeah.
right? A political epic thriller. So he's Varys' character. He doesn't have power essentially. He gains power through his cunning, through his skill, through all of the knowledge he accumulates, through the people he knows, through how he uses his wealth. You see him do that in the film, and he climbs that ladder of power. But at the end of the day, he's still perpetuating the own system.
Yeah.
In that way, you also can take a very much capitalist reading to this film.
Yeah.
Again, there's a brilliant joke in Futurama where Fry is like, yeah, down with the poor people. And Leela goes, but Fry, you're poor. And Fry goes like, yeah, but one day I won't be. And then people like me better watch out. It's the same.
Yeah.
That line is that same joke, right? Where if you try and use the system to your own benefit, you're still perpetuating the own system that hurt you. And I think that film really does that well with Denzel Washington's character, how he plays that system, and how you see at the end of the day, he's still playing it for himself. He doesn't really care for Rome, even though that's what his rhetoric is suggesting.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he's climbing that ladder of power. But while doing so, because of his charm, his charisma, and Denzel Washington himself, he really does sell you that at your point, you're like, maybe it's right to kill off this character because it did help. Like, it did make the people of Rome rebel. So I think all of these things really well depict how this film critiques the original, how it like comes back to the original and like builds on top of it. Again, I feel that it doesn't have that much staying power as the original because it's just not as grand, it's not as vivid as possible, but it still does what it's trying to do reasonably well.
Yeah.
Lastly, few things I want to shout out are firstly the fight choreography. I think the fight choreography is absolutely brilliant. You see the hits, you feel the hits. There's a really good sequence where there's a full ship fight inside an arena. They flood the arena. I think that's really fun. Some people rightfully dare point out that some of these fight sequences are also kind of stupid in the sense of nobody would take that decision. That's a bad decision, which fair. But at the moment, did I care? No, they were fun. Wood was flying.
It looked good.
The rule of cool.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think the fight sequences are really good. The set design, amazing. I love the set design. I was there. This is what it looked like. I was fully set on that. And also the music by Harry Gregson Williams was also really good. I think it set the stage. The whole of The soundscape, I think, was really well done. In a lot of these films, there are lots of like smaller sounds of like battles and everything, which really constructed for you the whole dimensionality of it. I think that's really well done. So at the end of the day, going back to the original,
Yeah, go on.
which a lot of people often regard as this outlier in like,
Because you don't expect a film like Gladiator to win an Oscar.
you don't expect. So in that film, I'm not expecting this film to really win an Oscar. I would be surprised if it does. The acting's good. It's a good, well-made film from Ridley Scott. It still falls victim to some of his regular flaws, which is like a lack of focus sometimes from his like epics on like the character and their stronger, like compelling things. But I still think because it fails to immerse you in the stakes as much as it should, and just because the characters don't feel as well realized as the original still comes ahead of this one. But in a world where there are much worse remakes happening, this is not a waste of your time.
It's not the worst.
It is not.
Okay.
So yeah, those are our thoughts. This has been another episode of Movie Asala. Thank you for watching. This podcast is produced wholly by us. Musical assets by Pixabay. Hope you tune in again next time.
Bye-bye.